Hello there, and welcome to All About Earth, where wonder doesn't rush and curiosity has all the time it needs. Wherever you are right now, I wonder, are you tucked into a warm bed, resting on a quiet sofa, or maybe lying beneath the stars themselves? The night sky has a way of listening back, don't you think? Each tiny light above you could be a story, a memory, a home. Take a slow breath, let your shoulders loosen. You're safe here in this small shared moment between the turning earth and the drifting dark. Now, let's follow a thought together, gentle like a ripple across water. What if the first civilization on Earth didn't vanish but departed? What if, long before the first human flame, before writing, before even the memory of stone, there was another people, a civilization that rose, learned, and then looked upward and left? Imagine them, builders of knowledge, keepers of oceans and skies, stepping beyond the cradle of their birth world. Perhaps they watched the same constellations we do, wondered the same questions we ask now. Perhaps they whispered to the stars before joining them. And us, maybe we are the ones who came after, the quiet inheritors of a planet once inhabited by dreamers who moved on. As you listen, let that thought settle like starlight, not to seek answers, not yet, only to feel the mystery of it. The idea that Earth's ancient past might be deeper than we remember, that its silence might not be emptiness, but the echo of those who already journeyed far beyond the sky. So wherever you are, in the hush of your room or under the slow drift of the Milky Way, let's begin there, with that question shimmering softly in the dark. What if the first civilization on Earth already left for the stars? The ancient air, Earth as a forgotten planet. Imagine, for a moment, the Earth breathing differently, the air thick with mist and memory, heavy with the scent of untouched forests and salt from unending seas. The sky is softer here, its blue dimmed by haze and volcanic dust. Light moves slower, filtered through layers of vapor, caught in the restless dance of particles that have been drifting since the dawn of time. The Earth turns beneath it all, patient and immense, carrying the weight of eons as easily as breath. Close your eyes and let that air fill your lungs. It is older than language, older than the bones of mountains. Every molecule has been recycled through countless lives, drifting from ocean to cloud to forest, from creature to creature, until it reached you. In that sense, you are breathing history, deep, invisible, alive. Millions of years ago, this air would have felt thicker, warmer, maybe even strange to our modern lungs. Oxygen was not yet as generous as it is now. Carbon dioxide was higher, clouds heavier, and lightning struck with the persistence of a heartbeat. The world was still forming its rhythm. Volcanoes exhaled continuously, their breaths painting the sky with red and gold. The oceans simmered, vast and untamed, mirroring the flickering of early storms. The continents were restless, wandering across molten foundations like dreamers searching for their names. There were forests then, but not as we know them. Giant ferns and towering lycopods stretched toward the dim sun, their leaves wide as sails, their roots deep in the wet earth. The air carried the musk of wet soil and the resin of ancient bark. Dragonflies, the size of birds, drifted above pools that reflected the shimmer of a younger sky. Amphibians, armored fish, creatures with eyes like polished stones, these were the citizens of that forgotten world. Every surface pulsed with life, yet every sound was slower, more deliberate. It was a planet not yet crowded by thought, still wrapped in its own quiet unfolding. No cities, no tools, no trace of geometry etched into stone. The wind passed over plains and through forests without interruption, whispering to no one but itself. And yet, there is a strange stillness in that thought, as though something once listened here and has since gone silent. The trees stand like witnesses, their roots entwined with memory. The oceans churn like sleeping giants, holding in their depths more secrets than any archive could contain. The world feels, not in the human sense, but in a deeper geological way, alive through process and pattern, through the slow intelligence of erosion and renewal. If you could walk through that ancient atmosphere, you might feel small, not because the trees are tall or the sky is wide, but because time itself feels denser. The air carries not just moisture, but the hum of countless ages layered atop one another. Every breath would taste faintly of metal, the ghost of minerals dissolved from newborn mountains. Rain would fall thick and warm, tracing rivers through landscapes still being written. Thunder would roll, not as interruption but as music, low, constant, like the voice of the planet itself. Science tells us that time erases. The crust shifts, folds, melts. Rock is ground into sediment, then reforged into new forms. The record of anything that once was, whether life, structure, or thought, is rewritten by the Earth's endless motion. Geology is both artist and destroyer. Sediment buries, pressure erases, oceans rise and swallow, mountains crumble and feed the sea. What remains is the texture of change itself. You can stand on a cliff and see layers of color, rust red, ochre, grey, and know that each band is an epoch, each curve a memory of a world that used to breathe differently. But the details, the names, the gestures, they're gone. Time doesn't keep a diary. It paints over yesterday with the minerals of tomorrow. And yet, myths whisper another kind of memory. Long before geology had a name, people looked at the sky and told stories of beings who descended in fire or who ascended in light. The Sumerians spoke of gods from the heavens who shaped men from clay and returned to the stars. The Greeks imagined titans buried beneath mountains, their bodies becoming the bones of the earth. In older, quieter traditions, ones now almost lost, there were tales of luminous teachers who came from the sky and left when the earth was still green, promising to return when the stars aligned again. Perhaps these were simply dreams of origin, born from, or perhaps they were echoes of something deeper, a collective memory of presence, of departure. The scientist in us says erosion, metamorphism, subduction. The mythmaker says ascension, departure, transformation. Both speak of movement, of things that rise and vanish, and perhaps both are right in their own languages. For what is a myth if not the human translation of forces too vast to measure? And what is science if not the myth retold in numbers instead of song? Picture now the great oceans of that forgotten age. Their surfaces gleam like molten glass beneath a dimmer sun. Waves carry whispers between continents, moving nutrients, warmth, and secrets in equal measure. Beneath them, the world is another planet entirely, a cathedral of darkness, where creatures glow like lanterns, where pressure crushes and silence reigns. The seafloor is restless, breathing through vents that exhale heat from the mantle. Minerals crystallize in slow motion, forming chimneys that glitter faintly in the dim. Life gathers there, tiny, resilient, strange. Tube worms, bacteria, crustaceans, life built not on sunlight, but on chemistry. Life that teaches us that existence does not always need light. Sometimes it only needs persistence. It's humbling to realize that these oceans, though ancient, were never empty. They've been alive longer than we can imagine. Every ripple has carried the same rhythm for billions of years. When you hear waves today, you're hearing the continuation of that same breath. The planet has been inhaling and exhaling through water since the beginning, and the melody has never changed. It's only we who have forgotten the tune. Above, the air carries spores, dust, the faint sighs of volcanoes. The continents shift imperceptibly, their edges glowing faintly where magma pushes through. The atmosphere is alive with movement, currents, storms, the delicate trade between sky and sea. Lightning splits the clouds, and for an instant the whole planet is lit from within like an eye-opening. In that flash, perhaps you could almost believe that the earth remembers something, something vast, something it cannot quite express. Imagine walking across a valley freshly carved by glaciers. The air there would taste like stone and time. Wind would whistle through hollows where rivers once ran, where forests once leaned toward the light. No footprints, no fire pits, no metal, only the steady murmur of wind through grass and the occasional cry of something unseen. The silence isn't empty, it's full, saturated with waiting. Even the air feels contemplative, as though it too is remembering a conversation long ended. To the geologist, that silence is natural, the inevitable product of time. Rocks rise and fall, ecosystems bloom and fade. Given long enough, all evidence is erased. But to the dreamer, The silence feels personal, almost tender. It's the hush that follows a story told long ago when the teller has gone and the echoes are still fading from the room. And in that hush, you might sense something like presence, a memory of heat, of intelligence, of motion beyond comprehension. Not proof, not even suggestion, just a feeling that the air itself once carried words. It has since forgotten. The atmosphere of ancient Earth was not static. It changed as life learned to breathe, as chemistry reshaped the sky. Once, oxygen was poison. Later, it became necessity. Methane ruled for a while, then waned. Carbon dioxide waxed and waned like the tide. Each phase was a chapter in the planet's autobiography, each molecule a letter in the long script of transformation. The air was both witness and participant, absorbing the exhalations of volcanoes and forests alike. Even now, traces of that primeval atmosphere remain, locked in ice, trapped in amber, whispered through fossilized leaves. When scientists study these remnants, they are, in a way, listening to the voice of the planet speaking across time. Myth, too, speaks of transformation. The gods of sky and storm, the deities of wind and breath, they are metaphors for the atmosphere itself. In every culture, the air was sacred because it was invisible, yet essential, formless, yet alive. The Greeks called it pneuma, the life breath. The Hindus named it prana. The Hebrews, roach. The Polynesians spoke of manna, carried by the wind. Each word is an echo of all before the same mystery, that something unseen can animate the scene, that breath itself is the bridge between life and death. When ancient people felt the wind rise from the sea or the desert, they might have felt it as a touch from something greater, perhaps even as a sign from those who had gone before, those who once walked here and then vanished into the heavens. Even now, if you listen closely to the wind, you might hear that same tone. It's subtle, low, a vibration that hums against the edge of perception. Maybe it's only air moving through branches. Maybe it's the memory of departure, still circling the world after countless ages. The air remembers what the earth forgets. Through billions of years, the planet has written and rewritten itself. Continents collided and drifted apart. Mountains rose and eroded. Oceans advanced and retreated. Each cycle left traces, and each trace was worn away. The grand irony of the Earth is that it keeps no monuments. Even its most dramatic stories, mass extinctions, cataclysms, rebirths, are softened by time until they blend into the quiet hum of being. And yet, that humility is its beauty. The planet's forgetfulness is not cruelty, it's mercy. It allows each new era to begin unburdened, each new species to imagine itself the first. But still, in the quiet moments between the roar of storms and the settling of dust, you can almost feel the weight of what has been lost. The air holds it, the way old rooms hold the scent of those who once lived there. It's not nostalgia, it's continuity. The same molecules that brushed against fern leaves in the Devonian now brush your cheek. The same oxygen that once filled the lungs of strange amphibians now fills yours. Life is not a chain of beginnings, but a single endless inhalation. If you could stand on some high ridge of that ancient Earth, say 500 million years ago, you might see a world both alien and familiar. The sun would burn softer, its warmth diffused through a haze of volcanic gases. The ocean would stretch in every direction, silver under the dim light. The air would shimmer with heat, filled with the calls of creatures no human ear has ever known. In that moment, you might realize that Earth was not empty. It was full, overflowing with motion, sound, chemistry, and potential. What it lacked was only wit, and that, perhaps, is the haunting part. To imagine a planet alive in every sense but unseen, unheard, unremembered. A place so full of stories that no one remained to tell them. That is the true loneliness of a forgotten world. Not the absence of life, but the absence of memory. Yet, even as you think this, the air moves. It brushes your face. It carries pollen, ash, sea spray, the scent of rain. It has crossed continents and epochs to reach you. In that invisible movement lies connection between past and present, between all that was and all that will be. The air of ancient Earth is not gone. It surrounds you still. Every breath you take is a small act of remembrance. So breathe again. Slowly, feel the warmth of the planet beneath you. the vast unseen ocean above. The air you draw in has touched mountains that no longer exist, creatures that left no names, civilizations, if any, that may have already gone to the stars. It carries the dust of their departure and the promise of your own becoming. This is the atmosphere of a forgotten planet, still alive, still breathing, still dreaming through you. The lost civilization, who were they, and why no trace remains? Imagine for a moment that the story of Earth is longer than we remember, not by centuries or millennia, but by entire epochs of unrecorded time. Imagine that before our first fires, before the shaping of stone tools, before even the earliest mammals dreamt in burrows, there was thought, not human thought, not quite, but something parallel, a mind that looked upon the same oceans, the same skies, the same unending mystery, and began to build. Not a legend carved into stone, but a reality, long since erased, the civilization before civilization. Who were they? Perhaps they were not human at all, not even ancestors, but another branch that the great tree of life once grew and quietly pruned, a lineage that reached intelligence long before primates learned balance, before apes found their hands. Maybe they walked on 6 limbs, or none at all. Maybe they glided through the air on membranes like sails, or spoke through vibrations beneath the sea. Their world might have smelled of iron and resin, of volcanic earth, of tides thick with ancient life. They might have known colors we cannot see, heard frequencies we no longer perceive, yet they thought. They shaped, they reached. The notion is almost too large for language. We think of civilization as stone and metal, as architecture and script, as the visible skeletons of culture. But what if intelligence wore a different form, fluid, organic, ephemeral? What if their monuments were not built to last, but to move, to sing, to dissolve gracefully into the planet's breath? What if the evidence was not lost, but intended to vanish, returning to the soil from which it came? Science offers its own, quieter story. The Earth is a master of forgetting. Its memory is layered, molten, restless. Over millions of years, continents drift, collide and sink. Mountains rise and crumble. Oceans flood and retreat. What was once land becomes seafloor, subducted into the mantle, melted, reformed. Even the oldest rocks, those rare survivors from Earth's youth, bear scars of heat and pressure, their original stories rewritten by time. Erosion, sedimentation, tectonics, the slow erasers. In their patient work, every trace of life becomes dust. Every city, if there ever was one, returns to the elements. Think of the pyramids, monuments of such permanence that they defy the desert. Give them 10,000 more years, 1,000,000 more. The wind will sand them smooth. The earth will fold and cover them. One day there'll be nothing but quartz grains in a new desert, unrecognizable even to the eye of a future geologist. Our skyscrapers, our highways, our satellites, all will be dust and silt, scattered in sediments that will someday be ground down and reborn as stone. Geological time doesn't destroy, it transforms, and transformation, in its quiet way, is indistinguishable from disappearance. So if there had been another civilization before us, millions, even tens of millions of years ago, what could possibly remain? Not their cities. Those would have long been crushed, subducted, and melted. Not their bones. Organic matter dissolves, decays, vanishes. Fossils, rare as miracles, form only under perfect conditions. The odds are cruelly low. A single tooth might survive 100 million years, but even then, it could be mistaken for something else. Time smooths away the peculiarities that make something remarkable. It returns all uniqueness to pattern. And yet, there are whispers. The mythology of humankind, scattered across continents and ages, hums with the memory of those who came before. Atlantis, swallowed by the sea, the Sumerian gods, who descended in fire and returned to the stars, the Hopi legends of past worlds destroyed and renewed, the Mayan cycles, counting creation after creation, even the old Norse tales, in which gods walk the earth before withdrawing to their distant realms. Different voices, different centuries, but all carrying the same tone of mourning. Something great was lost. Something that once stood here is gone. Of course, myth is not history. It speaks in symbols, not data. But sometimes symbols remember what language forgets. The story of Atlantis, for example, might be no more than metaphor, a warning about hubris, the inevitable fall of greatness. But what if it is also an echo of truth, faint but persistent? What if long ago there was a civilization that faced the end, not by destruction but by departure, a culture that reached the height of its understanding, and seeing the slow pulse of the Earth's cycles, chose not to fight them but to leave them behind? If such beings existed, they would have known the planet's temperament. They would have known that mountains rise only to fall, that oceans claim what they give, that permanence is an illusion even for stone. Perhaps they did not build monuments to endure, because they understood endurance to be vanity. They might have written in air, in light, in waves, leaving only traces too delicate for sediment to record. Or perhaps they hid their knowledge in forms we cannot yet recognize, in the magnetic signatures of rocks, in the chemical ratios of ancient sediments, in the DNA of species that still carry echoes of their presence. It sounds fantastical, yes, but so does the idea of life itself, of molecules arranging into memory, of consciousness arising from chemistry. Science, after all, has always been a discipline of wonder disguised as discipline. It reminds us that the extraordinary is often the natural viewed from too close a distance. Let us imagine, just for a moment longer, that these ancient beings lived not in the image of man, but in their own alien symmetry. Perhaps they were of the oceans, their architecture woven from coral-like structures that grew and lived with them, dissolving when they were gone. Maybe they shaped energy rather than matter, bending the ionosphere or guiding magnetic fields the way we guide rivers. Or perhaps they existed not above ground at all, but beneath it, in vast glowing networks that hummed through the crust, feeding on geothermal energy, existing beyond the surface gaze of time. And then one day or one millennium they vanished. No cataclysm, no war, no final scream, just silence. The kind of silence that spread slowly like fog. The forests reclaimed what they had never truly lost. The seas thickened with life again. The atmosphere forgot their breath and learned to sing in new tones. The earth folded the chapter closed, turned the page, and began again. To us, the absence of evidence feels decisive. But the absence of evidence is often just the presence of time. The fossil record is a patchwork quilt, whole eras missing, entire ecosystems erased. Even now, scientists debate what truly lived during the Cambrian explosion, the Permian collapse, the great warmings and coolings that reshaped the biosphere. We know so little, and the deeper we dig, the more fragile our knowing becomes. It's possible that civilization itself, any civilization, is a temporary condition, one that leaves only chemical whispers behind. The geologists speak of isotope ratios, carbon, oxygen, sulfur, as markers of change. They tell stories not with fossils but with chemistry. A sudden spike in carbon might mean a burst of volcanic activity. A thin layer of iridium could mark an asteroid's touch. But what if, hidden among those anomalies, there are signals of something else? A civilization's industry, its agriculture, its burning and building, smoothed by the eons into nothing more than a subtle shift in mineral balance. We might already have seen it, without realizing. A layer of clay, a trace of metal, a pattern dismissed as natural variation. And maybe that's what it means to live on a planet like ours. A world that recycles not only matter, but memory. Earth is too dynamic to be a museum. It does not keep relics, it keeps rhythm. Everything it forgets, it transforms into new possibility. Perhaps that's why when we speak of lost civilizations, we instinctively reach for myth. Myths are humanity's way of restoring continuity to a world that endlessly renews itself. They are fossils of thought, preserved in story rather than stone. Consider again the myth of Atlantis, a civilization drowned, punished for its pride, swallowed by the sea. To some it's a cautionary tale, but to others it feels more like a lament. There is tenderness in it, a sense of remembrance for something that mattered. Plato's version is only one of many. The Egyptians told of Zep Tepi, the first time when gods walked among men. In South America there were tales of shining teachers who taught and then departed. The Dogon people of Mali spoke of visitors from the star Sirius who once guided their ancestors. The Hopi told of previous worlds destroyed by flood and fire, of each new world rising from the ashes of the last. The Polynesians spoke of sky beings descending to shape the earth. Across the globe, across centuries, the same pattern, descent, guidance, departure. Is it coincidence, or is it memory filtered through metaphor? The scientific mind may lean toward coincidence, but the poetic heart hesitates. Myths persist because they feel true, not because they are provable. They hold emotional gravity, an echo of events too distant to document. Perhaps the mythic gods and heroes were not divine at all, but the fading memory of those earlier minds, translated through the language of the human imagination. Over time, knowledge becomes legend, legend becomes story, and story becomes the hum of mystery beneath our collective sleep. If they existed, those early beings might have watched as time unspooled behind them, knowing their cities would vanish, their technologies dissolve, their names be forgotten. Perhaps they didn't resist it. Perhaps they understood that impermanence is the only constant of the cosmos, that the measure of a civilization is not how long it endures, but how gracefully it lets go. And so they left, not in ruins, but in silence. No trace of ruin, no mark of despair, just the quiet bequeathal of a living planet, one that would someday grow new thinkers, new dreamers, new heirs to the same unending wonder. When we walk through the forest, when we dive into the sea, when we hold a piece of ancient stone and feel its coolness against our palm, perhaps we are touching the remnants of that forgotten story, not as evidence, but as echo. The minerals beneath our feet might once have been part of their walls. The carbon in our bones might once have been theirs. Everything cycles, everything returns. So when we ask, who were they? Maybe the answer is simpler than it seems. Maybe they were the earth, as we are the earth, brief configurations of matter and mind, arising, learning, vanishing, and giving way to what comes next. And if their absence feels like mystery, perhaps that's exactly what they intended. To become part of the planet's pulse, indistinguishable from the rhythm of wind and wave, to leave no trace but the beauty of possibility itself. The myths call them gods. The scientists call them improbabilities, but the earth calls them by another name, silence. A silence not of emptiness, but of completion, the kind that comes when a great work is finished and the artist steps away. Listen carefully, and you might still hear it. The faint hum of what once was, folded deep into the breath of the planet, carried in every storm, every tide, every gust of wind, a whisper not of absence, but of continuity. We were here once, and so are you. The first reason they left. Curiosity, the fire of the cosmos. Perhaps they left because they could not help themselves. Because somewhere beneath the crust of their thoughts a spark kept whispering, there must be more. The stars were not simply points of light to them. They were questions, infinite, burning questions, and curiosity, that quiet ache to know, to see, to understand, is not unique to us. It may be the oldest force in the universe, older even than life itself. The same impulse that made the first cell divide, that made the first creature lift its head toward the sky, might be the same one that once drove them from this world. It begins simply, as it always does, with wonder. Imagine those ancient beings, standing beneath a sky unspoiled by our modern glow, watching the Milky Way stretch like a river of fire across the heavens. To them, each star might have felt alive, pulsing like the heartbeat of creation itself. Perhaps they studied the rhythm of the constellations, mapped the movement of distant suns across the eons, and began to sense something both humbling and irresistible, that their world, beautiful as it was only one thread in a much larger tapestry. And once that awareness arrives, once a mind begins to imagine the beyond, there is no returning to stillness. The horizon ceases to be an edge. It becomes an invitation. That is the quiet tragedy and triumph of curiosity. It never ends. Science, in its calm voice, tells us that even stars are restless. They live and die in cycles of birth and brilliance, collapse and renewal. A sun expands, swallows its planets, sheds its skin of light, and from its ashes new worlds are born. Migration, transformation, exploration. These are not human inventions, they are cosmic habits. The universe itself is a traveler, always unfolding into the next possibility. Perhaps those ancient ones simply followed the pattern written into everything, to move outward, to reach for the unknown, to keep the dance going. We see echoes of that impulse in ourselves. We build telescopes and spacecraft, not out of necessity alone, but out of wonder. We look at Mars and see not just a barren rock, but a mirror of our own desire to touch, to learn, to leave footprints where none exist. The first civilization may have felt that same pull, gazing at their own red or blue worlds in the night sky, feeling their hearts stir with the need to know what lay beyond the shimmering edge of atmosphere. Maybe they began as we do, with stories, myths of ascent, of flight, of luminous beings climbing ladders of light into the heavens. In our own traditions, these myths linger. Prometheus stealing fire from the gods, Odin sacrificing himself for knowledge, Thoth measuring the stars, the Mayan hero twins ascending into the sky to become constellations. Every culture has its tales of those who left the earth to seek truth. Perhaps those old stories are not just metaphors, but distant reflections, echoes of an age when the boundary between myth and reality was thin, and curiosity had literal wings. Picture them then, those beings of an earlier earth standing on the threshold of the stars. They might have built crafts of energy or light, not the clumsy metal shells we imagine, but vessels woven from the fabric of natural forces, their technology as fluid and alive as they were. They would have studied the skies with the same patient obsession we see in our astronomers, tracing the pulse of supernovae, the drift of exoplanets, cosmic background hum that fills the universe with ancient echoes. Perhaps one day they realized that the story of their own sun was finite, that stars like civilizations are born to burn and to fade, and that to know the universe truly one must wander through it. But curiosity is not only scientific, it is spiritual. It is the instinct of existence itself, to question what it is. Every atom asks, "What am I?" when it bonds with another. Every wave of energy reaches beyond its origin. Even light, traveling for billions of years, behaves like a pilgrim, searching for the next frontier. To explore, then, is not an act of defiance against nature. It is nature continuing to ask itself new questions. Perhaps those beings were philosophers as much as explorers. They might have felt that to understand their place in the cosmos, they needed to see it firsthand, to walk upon the surfaces of other worlds, to listen to the silence of deep space. Their departure may have been a kind of devotion, a pilgrimage across the stars, driven not by fear or ambition, but by reverence. Think of it this way: when we look up at the stars, we are already participating in the same impulse. The eyes themselves are instruments of curiosity, evolved not only to survive, but to wonder. Every gaze upward is a small act of worship, an acknowledgement that we are part of something larger than ourselves. Perhaps they felt this too, that sacred yearning to bridge the distance between the seen and the unseen. The universe rewards curiosity in strange ways. A single question can lead to 1,000 discoveries, and each discovery opens 1,000 more questions. It is a chain with no end, a horizon that forever recedes as you approach. But that endlessness is what makes it holy. To explore is to surrender to infinity, to say, "I may never know it all, but I will never stop trying." Science gives us glimpses of what such wanderers might have witnessed. There are stars that explode and scatter their elements into space, seeding new worlds with the raw materials for life. There are planets that migrate from one orbit to another, carrying with them their own moons and histories. There are galaxies colliding, merging, reshaping, each a dance of gravitational desire. If a civilization watched these cosmic dramas unfold, would they not feel compelled to go and see them up close, to follow the trails of light across time, to study how creation renews itself again and again? Myth too tells us that knowledge and journey are intertwined. In almost every culture, the gods are travelers. Hermes crosses between worlds, Quetzalcoatl descends into the underworld and rises again. The Buddha looks beyond the limits of the mind. Even the Christian story of ascension speaks of transcendence through understanding. Perhaps those ancient beings were not gods, but their curiosity made them seem divine to those who remembered them. They became the archetype of the seeker, the eternal wanderer, the one who looks up, always. Curiosity is both light and shadow. It gives rise to art, science, and wisdom, but it also carries longing, the ache of incompletion. To wonder is to admit that something is missing. Maybe those early travelers felt that ache deeply. They had mapped their world, decoded its chemistry, understood its cycles. They had reached a point where their questions outgrew their horizon. And when that happens, the only honest thing left to do is to follow the question outward. I like to imagine their final night on Earth, the sky brilliant with auroras and meteors, the oceans calm, the forests whispering below, their crafts waiting, luminous, almost silent. Perhaps there was no ceremony, no farewell, just the quiet understanding that exploration is continuation, not abandonment. The wind might have carried their last breath into the upper air, mixing it with the gases that would someday become ours. And then, like seeds caught in a cosmic current, they drifted upward, away, into the long unfolding of space. It is strange to think that curiosity could be strong enough to pull an entire species from its cradle. But then, it is curiosity that pulled life itself from the sea. It is curiosity that made mammals climb, birds take flight, minds awaken. The pattern repeats, endlessly. The universe expands, and so does awareness. It seems to be a law written not in equations but in experience. Where there is life, there is the desire to know. Even now, billions of years later, that same current runs through us. We send machines to Mars, telescopes to the edges of time. We build theories of everything and still wonder what lies beyond them. We listen for signals in the static of the stars, not just hoping to hear someone else, but to hear ourselves echoed back. Curiosity is how the universe remembers itself through eyes, through minds, through questions whispered into the dark. Perhaps that is the real legacy of those who left. Not their technology, not their architecture, but their impulse. That restless, shimmering desire to seek. It has outlived them, carried forward in the genetic memory of all who came after. The earth, in a sense, learned it from them. Every breeze that rises seems to murmur their message. Go, look, wonder. The philosophers might say that curiosity is not merely an emotion, it is the shape of consciousness itself. To exist is to question. Even the stars, as they fuse their elements, seem to ask, what else can I become? Maybe that's all exploration ever is. The universe trying to see more of its own face, to know itself more completely. Those early travelers, leaving their home world behind, may have felt that they were not escaping it but fulfilling it. Through them, the earth extended its reach, its awareness, its dream. Myth and science converge here, as they often do. Science describes the expansion of space. Myth gives it meaning. Science tells us how stars are born. Myth tells us why we care. And curiosity sits between them, the bridge that unites what we can measure with what we can feel. When ancient people spoke of gods ascending to seek knowledge, they were describing the same truth in poetic terms, that to learn is to rise, that understanding is a kind of flight. Perhaps that is why, even now when we watch a rocket climb through the atmosphere or a satellite sail past the moon, it stirs something ancient in us, a memory of the first departure. Maybe that's why we look at the stars and feel both longing and recognition. We are not just looking outward, we are looking back. The first civilization may have left because curiosity demanded it, because the night sky called and they answered, because in every spark of awareness there is an echo of the Big Bang. The original question, what is this? What am I? And once that question is asked, it must keep asking itself forever. So they went, not as conquerors, not as exiles, but as seekers. Their departure was not an ending, but a continuation of the same story that began when the first atom bonded, when the first cell divided, when the first eye opened. They followed the pull of the universe toward itself, and somewhere, perhaps far away, they are still wandering, charting galaxies, listening to the pulse of stars, learning the languages of new worlds. Maybe they look back now and then at the small blue planet that once nurtured their curiosity and smile, because they would know what we too are learning, that curiosity is the purest form of love. It is how life reaches for life, how existence touches the unknown and says, I see you. The universe itself is curious. and we, like they once were, are simply its eyes, opening wider. The second reason they left: survival, the law of the universe. Perhaps in the end they left not because they wanted to, but because they had to. Curiosity may have stirred the first whispers of departure, but survival, ancient, instinctive, relentless, must have given it voice. It is the most fundamental rhythm of the cosmos. To endure, to adapt, to continue. Every creature, every atom, every flame shares that same pulse. Even stars live by it, burning fiercely until they must collapse and be reborn. Life, in all its forms, is loyal to one command: persist. So imagine a civilization, old and wise, having watched the Earth's long moods unfold, the rise and fall of oceans, the drifting of continents, the quiet, cyclical violence of extinction. They would have known, perhaps more clearly than we do, that paradise is never permanent. The planet that nurtures can also undo. The same tectonic heartbeat that raises mountains also cracks them apart. The same seas that cradle life can drown entire ages. They would have read it in the rocks, in the magnetic scars of ocean crusts, in the patterns of fossils entombed in stone. The earth, like all things, renews itself through destruction. Maybe they had already witnessed it more than once. A comet's sudden glare in the sky, bright enough to cast shadows at midnight. A season of fire and smoke. A year when the sun's warmth dimmed beneath the haze of volcanic ash. They might have known the story we now call the Chicxulub impact. The one that ended the age of giants 66 million years ago. A world bright with dinosaurs, lush and loud, reduced to silence in the span of days. The crater still sleeps beneath the Yucatan, a wound half buried by time. From that moment, life itself rewrote its script. Mammals rose, forests shifted, skies cleared, but the world that was before never returned. If such an event could erase an entire age, why not theirs? Perhaps they saw their own Chicxulub coming, a mountain of stone and ice hurtling through the dark, and understood what it meant. To stay would be to vanish. To leave would be to endure. And so they built, prepared, gathered what they could of knowledge and essence, and departed, not as conquerors of space, but as survivors of fate. Yet, not all endings come from the sky. Sometimes they rise from within the planet itself. Deep beneath the crust, molten seas turn and churn, waiting. Every few 100,000 years the pressure grows too much, and the world exhales through cataclysm. The scientists call them supervolcanoes: Yellowstone, Toba, Taupo, the Siberian traps. When they erupt, the air fills with sulfur, the sun dims, the climate stumbles. Ash falls like snow for years, choking forests, burying rivers, cooling the earth into famine. Entire ecosystems collapse. Humanity itself has nearly vanished in such times. A civilization with foresight would not wait for the sky to turn black. They would see the warning signs in the tremors, the heat, the patterns of gases rising from fissures in the ground. They would know when the planet was about to turn its face away. Perhaps they did not flee a single event, but the slow accumulation of many, a chain of disasters, natural and self-inflicted, weaving together until staying became impossible. We imagine progress as a line that always ascends, but the Earth has its own opinions about permanence. Continents shift, poles wander, climates freeze and thaw. Entire ages vanish into silence. Maybe their world entered such a phase. The sun dimmed, the magnetic field faltered, ice advanced across continents. Survival, once a matter of adaptation, now demanded departure. Or perhaps the danger was of their own making. Civilizations, after all, carry the seeds of both creation and ruin. They may have mined too deeply, altered their climate, poisoned their air. The same brilliance that allowed them to shape the world might have tipped its balance. We know this story. It's one we are beginning to live ourselves. Oceans rising, species vanishing, the atmosphere thickening with the ghosts of our industry. They too might have faced this reckoning, the moment when knowledge outpaces wisdom. If so, perhaps their exodus was not just an escape, but an act of repentance, a choice to leave the world to heal, to let the earth begin again without them. Maybe their departure was not driven by panic, but by understanding that life must not end with them, even if their chapter did. They might have looked upon their fading world and whispered something like a promise. We will go, so you may stay. Science tells us that life has survived 5 great mass extinctions, each reshaping the planet's possibilities. The Permian, when 90% of species perished, the Ordovician, when ice claimed the seas, the Cretaceous, when the dinosaurs fell. Each time the Earth paused, exhaled, and began anew. It is a pattern so consistent it almost feels intentional, as if extinction itself were a form of evolution. Perhaps those ancient ones recognized that truth, that survival sometimes means leaving behind what cannot be saved. Myth remembers such endings differently. It speaks of floods and fires, of gods and storms, of wrath and renewal. The story of Noah, the Epic of Gilgamesh, the sinking of Atlantis, the flood of Manu, the great deluge of Deucalion, all retell the same event through different tongues. The world drowns, and the chosen few survive. In every telling, there is warning and mercy intertwined. The waters rise, cleansing and cruel, and what remains begins again. Could it be that those myths are not metaphor but memory? That the survivors of an ancient cataclysm became our ancestors, their stories distorted but enduring? Maybe flood was their word for everything that overwhelms the meteor's ocean of fire, the ash that fell like rain, the slow rising of seas as the ice melted. Each story, though shaped by time and faith, still carries the pulse of the same truth. Survival is sacred. And so we come again to philosophy, which asks not how they left, but why survival matters at all. What is the point of persistence in a universe so vast, so indifferent? Perhaps it is simply the nature of being to continue being. Even stars, when they die, scatter their atoms as seeds for new stars, new worlds, new forms of consciousness. To survive is to participate in the continuity of creation. It is not selfishness, it is the universe remembering itself through time. Maybe those ancient ones understood this with a clarity we have yet to achieve. They saw that the end of their era was not failure, but transformation. To remain would have been to perish. To leave was to evolve. In this way, survival becomes not resistance to change, but acceptance of it. They followed the deeper law that life must adapt or dissolve, and adaptation sometimes means flight. There is a quiet nobility in that choice. Imagine knowing that your world is dying and still choosing not despair but motion. Imagine building vessels not for conquest, but for continuity. They may have carried fragments of their planet with them, seeds, genes, memories, dreams, so that even as Earth healed, a part of it would live on elsewhere. Perhaps they left behind markers for future beings, though time has since erased them, as it erases. When we look at the fossil record, we see only the survivors of each age. Life has always been a lottery of resilience. The ammonite, the trilobite, the mammoth, all gone. Yet from their endings came something new. That too is survival, not of the individual but of pattern, the pattern of persistence through change, the same pattern that may have guided the first civilization toward the stars. It's strange to think of survival in cosmic terms. We usually imagine it as desperation, as clinging to life. But on the scale of worlds and aeons, it becomes something gentler, a continuation of energy, a migration of awareness. When a comet slingshots around a star, when a planet drifts to a new orbit, when a seed floats across an ocean, the act is the same. Life-seeking equilibrium, perhaps their journey was no different. Even in our myths, the impulse to survive is never condemned, it is sanctified. The ark is a symbol of faith, as much as pragmatism. The hero who builds it does so not out of greed, but love, for creation, for kin, for the chance that life might begin again. Perhaps they too built their own kind of ark. Vast, radiant, capable of carrying not just bodies, but cultures, histories, languages, memories of sky and soil. A vessel, not of escape, but of remembrance. The scientists among them might have understood what we now know, that cosmic disasters are not rare. The solar system itself is a museum of impacts. Craters mark the moon like fingerprints. Mars bears the scar of Valles Marineris, a wound 1,000 miles long. Even Earth, ever repairing, carries hidden fractures from collisions too ancient to name. The asteroid belt whispers of a world that might have been and never was. To live in such a system is to live under the slow rhythm of catastrophe. Perhaps they learned this truth, not through fear, but through inevitability. To remain bound to one planet forever would be to gamble against the odds of time. So they left, not as fugitives, but as realists, as caretakers of continuity. Perhaps they watched their home fade into distance, a blue-green orb shrinking against the black, and felt no triumph, only solemn gratitude. They might have known that life in some form would return there, that evolution would write new stories upon the same soil. Maybe they even expected us. And if we are, in some deep sense, their descendants, if their atoms, their patterns, their echoes seeded what would one day become human, then we are living proof that their instinct was right. Survival is not selfishness, it is generosity. It is the giving forward of possibility. When we look up now and wonder whether we too might one day need to leave, we are participating in the same ancient impulse. Climate shifts, the ice melts, the storms grow stronger. We build rockets, talk of colonies, imagine new worlds. Beneath all our technology lies the same simple plea that has guided life since its beginning. Let there be something after. Perhaps then we should not mourn their departure. Perhaps it was an act of faith, faith in the universe, in life, in the power of renewal. They trusted that existence continues beyond any one world, that no catastrophe can silence the will to live. The stars are full of ruins, yes, but also of rebirth. Every nova is a death that gives birth to a nebula. Every extinction paves the way for evolution's next experiment. So when the winds rise, when the skies burn, when the oceans swell, perhaps the universe is not ending but turning the page. And somewhere, across the quiet reaches of space, those ancient travelers are still moving, still enduring, carrying within them the story that began here, the story of survival. They may look back sometimes through their instruments of light and see our little planet glimmering faintly against the dark. Maybe they feel what we would feel in their place: sorrow, pride, and hope. They might whisper across the void, not in words but in thought, something like, live as we lived, endure as we endure, because survival is not a choice. It is the oldest prayer, the first and final rhythm of life. And in every breath we take, in every step we make beneath the same ancient sky, we echo its. The third reason they left: ambition, the call beyond one world. Perhaps the truest reason they left was not fear, not curiosity, but a deeper impulse still, a restlessness written into the marrow of life itself. They were not running from anything, nor seeking safety in the dark. They went because they desired more, because the world, for all its beauty, had become too small for their dreams, because ambition, that ancient and dangerous flame, had begun to burn too brightly to be contained by a single sky. It is easy to imagine them standing at the edge of their world, watching the horizon bend away, feeling the pull of the stars like gravity in reverse. They might have looked upon their oceans and mountains, their forests and storms, and thought, "We have known you, Earth. Now we must know what lies beyond." Not out of ingratitude, but inevitability. Every creature born of this planet carries, however faintly, that same restlessness. The salmon fights upstream, the bird migrates across hemispheres, the seed travels on the wind. Life itself resists boundaries. To cross them is its truest nature. So, when the first civilization reached the height of its mastery, when their instruments could pierce the dark between worlds, when their sciences could tame energy and distance, they would have turned their gaze outward. They would have realized that to stay confined to one planet was to live in a cage, however vast and lovely that cage might be. The same laws that bind stars to galaxies also whisper a quiet promise: expansion. Science, in its cool and measured tone, calls this becoming multiplanetary. It is the idea that life which spreads across worlds is life that endures. But for them, it may have meant more than endurance. It was transcendence, the next step of evolution. Not just biological, but philosophical. They may have looked at their blue horizon and seen it not as home, but as beginning. To go beyond was not escape, it was expression. They must have understood, as we do, that ambition is both peril and progress. It is the spark that drives civilizations to rise, but also the flame that can consume them. And yet, without it, nothing grows. Without it, life would have remained forever in the tide pools, never reaching for air, never walking, never dreaming. Ambition is the force that transforms limitation into opportunity, gravity into flight. Perhaps they believed that even the cosmos itself was incomplete until life reached out to touch it. Think of the myths that have carried this idea through our own ages. Prometheus ascending to steal fire, Gilgamesh seeking immortality, Icarus daring to fly too high, the Tower of Babel, the heavenly chariot of Elijah, the stairway of Jacob. Each tale hums with the same yearning. To rise, to cross the line between mortal and divine. Even when the stories end in fall or flame, the yearning itself remains sacred. To aspire, to ascend is the mark of sentient life, the refusal to remain still. Perhaps those ancient beings lived those myths in truth. Maybe their ascent to the stars was their act of defiance against gravity, against time, against the quiet voice of the planet that said, "Stay." They answered, "We cannot," because ambition, when it matures, becomes not greed, but growth. They may have seen the stars not as destinations to conquer, but as mirrors of what they could become. The scientists among them would have known the stakes of such a journey. To travel between worlds requires mastery, not only of space, but of patience, of energy, of courage beyond measure. They might have bent space itself, folded light, harnessed the tides of gravity. They may have built vessels that could survive for millennia, carrying their kind across the vastness between suns. Perhaps they did not think in lifetimes, but in epochs, planting themselves among the stars as trees, plant their seeds across valleys, each world a new branch of life's endless experiment. In this way, ambition becomes a kind of cosmic ecology, life expanding into new niches, new conditions, new dreams. It is not conquest, but flower, and yet one can imagine the enormity of their decision to leave behind the cradle that had shaped them, to release the familiar air, the ancient soil, the constant rhythm of their planet's breath. They must have known that they would never return, but perhaps that was the point. Ambition often asks for sacrifice, not of love, but of certainty. To some of them, it might have felt like faith, not faith in gods, but faith in potential, the conviction that consciousness was meant to move ever outward, like ripples from the first spark of existence. The same faith that drives us now to send machines toward the edges of our solar system, to map galaxies billions of light years away, to whisper into the void, "We are here." And perhaps deep within that faith, there was pride, not arrogance, but the dignified pride of creation. To know that they had risen from the clay of their world, learned its laws, and could now shape their own, that they were, in a sense, continuing the work of the universe, creating, exploring, unfolding. Their ambition may have been the universe recognizing itself in their eyes, urging them forward. It is tempting to imagine that they were unified in this vision, that they moved as one, but ambition rarely sings in harmony. Some among them must have doubted. Some must have feared that leaving would mean forgetting. Some must have seen the stars as too distant, too indifferent, yet even dissent could not silence the pull, because ambition, once awakened, cannot be put back to sleep. It is the tide that rises, no matter how many stones are stacked against it. Maybe they prepared for generations. Maybe their skies filled with craft, their oceans reflected the glow of ascending ships. Maybe the earth on that final night looked up and watched its children depart, silent but proud. And when the last vessel disappeared beyond the upper air, perhaps the planet sighed, a long, slow exhale, as though saying, "Go then, and become what I cannot." Science suggests that spreading across worlds is the only way for a species to endure forever. But philosophy might say it differently. To live only on one planet is to misunderstand life itself. Existence was never meant to be confined. Even the atoms that make us were born in the cores of distant suns, flung across space by supernovae, gathered again by gravity and chance. We have already travelled between stars. We are the evidence of it. Our bones are stardust rearranged into memory. Perhaps those who left simply recognized this truth more fully. that to remain bound to one world is to forget where you came from. In mythology, the ascent to the heavens is always more than a climb. It is a transformation. When Enoch walked with God and was taken into the sky, he was said to have become an immortal being. When Buddha attained enlightenment, he rose beyond the wheel of rebirth. When the Egyptian pharaohs died, they joined the sun in its daily journey across the sky. The heavens are not just a place, but a symbol, the dimension of becoming. To ascend is to evolve. Perhaps then, their departure was their enlightenment. Not an escape from mortality, but its fulfillment. They had reached the limits of what their planet could teach them, and now the stars awaited as the next great teacher. For in the scale of the universe, growth is endless. Each discovery is a doorway to another. Each step forward reveals not the end, but the beginning again. Maybe they sought to seed not only life, but meaning among the stars, to transform the cold spaces between suns into places of thought and memory, to turn emptiness into awareness, to continue the dialogue that began with the first spark of life on Earth. What are we, and what might we become? Their ambition may have been cosmic empathy, the desire to fill the void, not with conquest, but with consciousness. And yet, ambition has its shadows too. Perhaps they wondered, as they left, whether their desire to expand would one day consume them, whether the hunger for creation might become the hunger for control, whether in seeking the stars they might forget the soil that had given them breath. Ambition always walks beside humility, and only in their balance can wisdom grow. But they went anyway, because to hesitate forever is another kind of extinction. In the end, their ambition might not have been a choice, but an instinct, the universe's own drive to know itself through them. They were, in a sense, the fingertips of creation stretching outward, testing its boundaries. To stop would have been to deny the very logic of existence. So they rose, lifting from their world like dandelion seeds on the breath of the cosmos. Each craft a petal of fire drifting toward a new sun, each mind a continuation of the great experiment that began in the dark oceans of early Earth. They carried with them not only knowledge and technology, but hope, the belief that the story of life was not meant to end, but to echo across the galaxy. Even now, when we look up at the stars, perhaps we feel the ghost of that same ambition stirring within us, the desire to leave not as refugees, but as explorers, to take the next step, not in fear, but in wonder. We speak of colonization, of expansion, of spacefaring civilizations, but beneath the language of science and progress lies something older, the pulse of ambition beating in time with the turning of the universe. And perhaps, just perhaps, they still live among those stars, transformed, radiant, unbound. Not gods, but what gods were always meant to represent, the potential of life when it refuses to stop becoming. The philosophers say that ambition is not pride, it is the engine of evolution. It is the universe's desire to move from simplicity to complexity, from darkness to light. The same force that turned hydrogen into stars and stars into life now turns life into thought and thought into journey. To dream of the stars is not arrogance. It is memory. It is inheritance. Maybe that is what the earth whispered to them in their final days. Fly far, but remember me. And maybe it whispers the same to us now. Because one day we too will have to decide whether to stay or to go, whether to remain children of this single world or to become citizens of many. And when that moment comes, perhaps we will feel what they once felt. Not fear, not loss, but the quiet certainty that ambition is sacred. They left not to escape, not to survive, but to expand the very meaning of life, to prove that consciousness need not end where one horizon does, to let the stars themselves become the next chapter of the Earth's story. And somewhere, out there in the vast silence between suns, their ambition still glows. A constellation unseen by any telescope but felt in every mind that dares to dream beyond the sky. Did they return? Faint memories in myth and DNA. There are nights when the stars seem closer, when their light trembles as if carrying a message we've forgotten how to read. In those moments, the old question drifts quietly through the human mind. Did they ever come back? Those who left, the first dreamers, the travelers between worlds, did they look once more upon the earth, the cradle that shaped them? Or have they become so changed, so distant, that even the idea of return has no meaning. The myths, of course, have their answers. They always do. In every corner of the world, across every tongue and tradition, there are stories of beings who came down from the sky, luminous, powerful, wise, and then departed again, promising to return. The Sumerians spoke of the Anunnaki, gods who descended from the heavens to guide and instruct humankind. The Dogon people of Mali told of Nomo, amphibious beings from the star Sirius, who taught language and harmony. The Maya wrote of Kukulkan, the feathered serpent who came from the sky, built civilizations, and then vanished over the sea, with a vow to come back. The Polynesians sang of Tangaroa, the sky wanderer. The Greeks dreamed of Apollo's chariot, blazing across the firmament, his return marked by cycles of light and renewal. Even in the deserts of the Near East, the story repeats: Engels, watchers, messengers, those who once walked among us, and then were. It is easy to see these as symbols, expressions of longing, ways of explaining the sky's grandeur. And yet, when so many cultures whisper the same pattern, separated by oceans and centuries, the mind begins to wonder. Are these merely stories, or are they memories, blurred by time, translated by imagination into myth? Perhaps, long ago, the sky really did open. Perhaps those who left returned for a moment to see what had become of the world they had once called home. If they did, what would they have found? The earth renewed, its scars softened by eons, its surface reshaped by ice and sea. The air thick with new voices, new species, a different kind of intelligence rising from the dust, fragile, upright, curious. Would they have recognized themselves in our faces, our eyes lifted toward the same stars they once followed? Or would we have seemed primitive, unfinished, a work in progress, still learning how to listen to the planet that carries us? Science, in its quiet precision, adds its own layer to the mystery. Inside the spiraling architecture of DNA, the molecule of memory, the script of life, there are patterns that confound us still, sequences that seem older than their hosts, segments of code that appear out of place, as though borrowed from nowhere. Some of it, we know, comes from viruses, ancient hitchhikers that stitched themselves into our genetic tapestry millions of years ago. But there are regions that defy easy origin, stretches of the genome that do not match the slow arithmetic of evolution. They are rare, quiet anomalies, but they are there. Could these be the remnants of something more deliberate? A message, perhaps, encoded not in words or stone, but in the very fabric of biology. If the first civilization returned, maybe they did not reveal themselves openly. Maybe they chose to leave something subtler, a whisper woven into the double helix, a reminder of their legacy. DNA, after all, endures far longer than metal or monument. It replicates, mutates, carries forward. What better medium for inheritance? Not of culture, but of essence. It is, of course, only speculation. Science demands caution, evidence, restraint. But philosophy allows gentler wonder. And philosophy asks, what if memory can take forms we do not yet understand? Perhaps the earth itself remembers them, not in fossils or artifacts, but in the rhythm of tides, the tilt of the seasons, the quiet intelligence of ecosystems that seem almost intentional. Perhaps memory does not always need a mind. Perhaps it can live in patterns. If they did return, maybe they did so long ago, before our written histories began. Maybe they walked unseen through our forests, swam through our seas, studied us from behind the veils of atmosphere. To beings who had crossed the stars, our civilizations might have seemed like the flickering of candles, beautiful, fragile, brief. They might have watched us build cities, invent gods, wage wars, and love, and wonder. Perhaps they smiled at our questions, the same questions they once asked before they too became wanderers. Where did we come from? Why are we here? Are we alone? There are stories, faint but persistent, that hint at encounters. Ancient carvings showing figures with helmets and stars, cave paintings of radiant beings descending on beams of light. In some traditions, the gods are described as teachers who brought the arts of civilization, writing, agriculture, medicine, astronomy. They came from the heavens And when their work was done, they returned there. Maybe myth, in its poetic way, is simply telling us they came back once, briefly, to set the stage for what would follow. But if they truly returned, why not stay? Why leave again, so completely that only stories remain? Perhaps they no longer belonged here. Evolution is not static. Time shapes not just bodies, but consciousness. If they continued evolving physically, mentally, technologically, they might now exist in forms beyond our recognition. They could be beings of energy, of light, of thought alone. To us, they would be invisible, intangible, like wind or radiation, or the shimmer at the edge of perception. Perhaps they did not leave at all. They simply moved beyond the spectrum of our senses. Science gives us a language for such speculation, though it calls it by other names: higher dimensions, quantum fields, dark matter. We live surrounded by unseen forces, immersed in oceans of energy we cannot touch. 95% of the universe by our own measure is invisible. Is it so impossible that consciousness could inhabit those hidden realms? If they evolved far enough, they might not have left us. They might be all around us, folded into the very fabric of reality, watching silently as we awaken to our own potential. And if they are watching, what must they see? A species just beginning to grasp its place in the cosmos, still torn between creation and destruction, still learning the language of balance. They would see children playing with the tools of gods, splitting atoms, shaping genomes, listening to the songs of distant planets. They would recognize the same fire that once burned in them, the will to know, the hunger to reach. Perhaps they would feel pride, or sorrow, or both. Perhaps they would wonder if they had left too soon. It may be that their return is not something we would recognize. Maybe it has already happened, not in ships descending from the clouds, but in the awakening of our own minds. The impulse to explore space, to seek truth, to feel awe in the face of the unknown. Could that be their legacy, alive within us? Maybe we are not waiting for their return at all. Maybe we are their return, the continuation of their curiosity, their courage, their ambition, reborn in new forms. But still the myths persist. The watchers in the sky, the gods who promise to come back, the ones who will return when the stars are right, the poets and prophets who claim to hear their voices in dreams. Even in modern stories, science fiction, film, art, we repeat the same theme, that someone somewhere greater than ourselves once touched this world and might again. It is not just a story of longing, it is a story of recognition. Deep down, humanity seems to feel that we are part of something ancient, something that began long before us and has not yet ended. Philosophy reminds us that return is not always about movement in space. It can also be a movement of awareness. To return is to remember, to bring back into consciousness something that was forgotten. Perhaps they do not need to descend from the sky. Perhaps what they left behind in us, the curiosity, the creativity, the strange ache for the infinite, is their way of returning through us. When we dream of the stars, maybe it is not our dream at all, but theirs, still echoing through the long corridors of DNA and time. If that is true, then their return is not an event to come, but an unfolding already in progress. It happens every time a child looks up and asks, "What's out there?" Every time a scientist decodes a new mystery of the cosmos. Every time an artist paints the heavens, or a poet writes of home among the stars. They are not gone. They have become the longing itself. And yet, part of the mind still wonders, what if one day the sky opens again? What if a light unlike any comet appears, descending slowly through the clouds? Would we recognize them? Would we understand what we are seeing? Or would we, like our ancestors, turn to myth to explain the unexplainable? Perhaps they would not come as conquerors or saviors, but as witnesses, observers of what became of their inheritance. The philosophers might say they would not come to intervene, but to understand, to see how far the experiment has gone, how the story they began continues to write itself. If they are watching, maybe they are not judging. Maybe they are simply waiting for us to reach the point they once reached, to look into the same abyss and make the same choice, to remain or to rise. Maybe their return will not be from above, but from within, the moment we realize that they never truly left, that every heartbeat, every thought, every act of wonder is part of their continuing presence. Still, there is beauty in not knowing. The uncertainty keeps the mystery alive, keeps the imagination turning like the planets themselves, whether they dwell among the stars or within our genes, whether they will return in light or remain in silence. Their memory shapes us. It is in our myths, in our cells, in the quiet urge that drives us to reach farther than reason says we should. And perhaps that is enough. Perhaps their true return is not a visitation but an awakening. The moment we finally see ourselves as part of the same continuum that once sent them into the sky. When that happens, when we recognize in our own reflection the spark that once burned in theirs, we will not need them to come back. We will understand that we have been walking the same path all along. But on clear nights, when the stars shimmer just so, when the wind carries a whisper through the trees, it's hard not to feel it, the presence of something vast and patient, older than memory, watching from the dark between suns. Not with malice, not with pity, but with a kind of cosmic tenderness, as if the universe itself were saying, "You are not alone. We remember you." And maybe, just maybe, that is their return, not in ships or fire, but in the feeling that the heavens are not empty after all. That somewhere out there, or perhaps deep within, the first travelers still wait, still listen, still care for the fragile world that gave them birth. The earth turns beneath their gaze, and we, their distant heirs, continue the story. The stars above us are not just light, they are memory, shining softly, with the promise that nothing truly leaves forever, that all who wander, in time, find their way home. The lesson of survival, becoming multiplanetary to escape extinction. Perhaps the greatest lesson left to us, written not in stone or scripture but in silence, is this: no world, no matter how beautiful, can last forever. The earth, for all its vast oceans and green breath, for all its delicate balance between warmth and cold, life and decay, is not immortal. Its heart beats through cycles of creation and collapse, and we, its children, must one day learn to live beyond its cradle if we wish to endure. The story of survival is older than humanity. It began when the first spark of life clung to the ocean floor, when simple cells learned to divide in the dark heat of hydrothermal vents. It continued when creatures crawled from the sea to the land, when lungs replaced gills, when wings reached for sky. Each leap was an act of courage, a step into the unknown. Evolution itself is the story of migration, from water to air, from instinct to thought. And now thought faces its next migration, from one world to many. Science whispers this truth with both tenderness and urgency. The Earth, it says, is fragile. Our atmosphere is thin, our biosphere delicate. A single strike from an asteroid, a single eruption from a supervolcano, a single slow shift in the chemistry of air or sea, any of these could undo everything that life has built. The planet has nearly died before. It can happen again. We are not guaranteed permanence, simply because we have language and tools. The Chicxulub impact, 66 million years ago, is a reminder written into the bones of every living thing. A single asteroid, roughly 10 kilometers across, fell from the sky, struck the Yucatan Peninsula, and ended an age. Forests burned, oceans boiled, skies darkened, the sunlight disappeared for years. 90% of life vanished. Yet even then, survival did not stop. It changed form. From that devastation came mammals, and eventually us. Catastrophe is not the end, only a transformation. But what if next time we could choose not to vanish? That is where the dream begins. The dream of becoming multiplanetary. Elon Musk and others speak of Mars as a frontier not of conquest, but of continuity. A world waiting not for colonization but for participation in the grand experiment of life. To live on Mars would be to extend Earth's story across space, to ensure that no single event, no single world can silence the song of existence. The idea is not new, it has always been there deep in the mythic heart of humanity. In myth, the gods themselves were wanderers. The Egyptian Ra crossed the sky by day and journeyed through the underworld by night, reborn each dawn. The Hindu devas moved between realms, carrying knowledge from one to another. The Greek pantheon lived among the clouds of Olympus, but their origins lay beyond Earth's soil. Even in Genesis, the divine is never stationary. Creation itself is motion, expansion, migration. The cosmos was not made to be still, and so, when we dream of moving beyond our planet, we are echoing a sacred pattern, the migration of the divine into new forms of life. Perhaps then, the act of leaving Earth is not abandonment, but reverence. To carry the spark of this planet to another is to honor its gift. Every grain of soil, every drop of water, every breath we take has been shaped by 4 billion years of persistence. To bring that legacy to Mars or to the moons of Jupiter or to the endless unknown beyond is to continue what Earth began, to let it bloom in new colors under new suns. Science gives us reasons to move outward. Mythology gives us meaning, and philosophy, in its slow and luminous way, reminds us that survival is not just physical, it is existential. To remain bound to one world is to live with illusion. The universe does not belong to Earth alone, it belongs to everything capable of knowing it. To exist is to explore, to thrive is to expand awareness, to survive is to share life with the stars. It is not an easy path. To become a multiplanetary species is to face distance, radiation, isolation, and the cold indifference of space. But perhaps the universe tests the worthy through difficulty. It asks, how much do you value your own continuation? How far will you go to preserve consciousness, the rarest bloom in the garden of matter? To answer by going beyond Earth is to affirm life itself, to say, we are not done yet. Imagine a world where humanity has spread across the solar system. Colonies beneath the ice of Europa, greenhouses under domes on Mars, floating cities drifting through the clouds of Venus. Each settlement different, adapted, alive in its own way. The human spirit scattered like seeds, learning to flourish in new environments. Each world a new version of home, carrying in its air and stone the essence of the one that birthed us. In that vision, survival becomes art. Each generation learns to sculpt existence from the raw materials of space, to transform danger into beauty. The first farmers of another planet will be poets of a new dawn. The first children born under an alien sky will be living testaments to Earth's enduring creativity. Through them the story continues. And yet, even as we dream of other worlds, Earth remains the center of meaning. It will always be the first home, the origin, the mother. To leave her is not to forget her, but to make her eternal. For if her children survive elsewhere, she can never truly die. Her memory will ripple through the stars in the breath of those who remember her blue oceans, her green scent after rain, her gentle turning toward the sun. There is a profound humility in realizing that survival demands movement. It means accepting that stability is illusion, that all things evolve or fade, the universe itself expands, stretching toward infinity. Why should life be any different? To become multiplanetary is to synchronize with that cosmic rhythm, to live not against change but within it. Philosophers might call it the awakening of planetary awareness, the moment when a species realizes it is not confined to the boundaries of its birth. It is the transition from child to adult, from dependent to self-sustaining. In mythic terms, it is the exodus, the sacred journey away from the garden, not as punishment but as destiny. Humanity's departure from Earth will not be a rebellion, but a rite of passage. And like all rites, it carries both fear and wonder. There will be those who say we are overreaching, that the stars are not meant for us. But then every great leap in history has sounded like hubris before it became heritage. The first fish that crawled onto land defied its ocean. The first bird to fly defied gravity. The first human to step into space defied the ancient boundary between heaven and earth. Each act of defiance was also an act of faith. We might imagine the future as a series of arcs, not of wood but of light and metal, carrying seeds, water, art and memory to new worlds. Perhaps one day, long after Earth has cooled and its continents drifted into silence, those distant descendants will look toward the faint shimmer of the Milky Way and whisper, "That is where we began," and they will keep going, carrying the story onward, as the first travelers once did. In a way, this vision fulfills the oldest dreams of both science and spirit. Science seeks to preserve life. Spirit seeks to give it purpose. The multiplanetary journey answers both. It ensures that the song of the earth will continue to play and that each verse will be sung in a new key, under a new sky. Elon Musk once said that life must be more than the solving of problems. It must be something that inspires. To dream of Mars, to build toward it, is to choose inspiration over complacency. It is a statement of reverence for existence itself. In mythic language, it is the building of a new ark, not because of divine wrath, but because of divine opportunity. The universe, like the ocean of Noah's story, is vast and deep, and we, the inheritors of ancient resilience, must learn to navigate it. The old myths of migration have always carried this essence. The Israelites crossing the desert, the Polynesians sailing across endless seas, guided only by stars. The Norse gods moving through 9 realms. Every journey outward mirrors the same truth. To survive, one must move. To evolve, one must let go. The divine migration is not flight, it is fulfillment. So what does it mean for us now, standing at the dawn of our own exodus? It means learning once again to live with courage, curiosity, and humility. It means treating space, not as a prize, but as a responsibility, a continuation of Earth's experiment in consciousness, to bring not only our technology, but our kindness, our ethics, our sense of wonder, to seed not just life but meaning wherever we. Philosophically, the idea of becoming multiplanetary invites a larger reflection. Perhaps survival is not simply about avoiding extinction, but about expanding the capacity for joy, for creation, for awareness. If existence is the universe learning about itself, then every new world we touch becomes another mirror of understanding. We become, in a sense, the eyes of creation wide. And yet, even this grand destiny should not blind us to simplicity. Survival begins with gratitude. To protect life, we must first love it, deeply, fiercely, without arrogance. To go to Mars or beyond must be an act of devotion, not domination. The first step to surviving among the stars is to remember that we belong to the stars already. Our atoms, our stories, our dreams are made of them. So let the lesson of the first travelers, real or imagined, sink softly into our hearts. Survival is not cowardice, nor greed. It is faith. Faith in continuity, in transformation, in the sacred will of life. To keep breathing, even in the cold. Becoming multiplanetary is not just strategy. It is an offering, a way of saying to the cosmos, we will not let your creation end here. One day, our descendants will stand on another world and look back toward Earth, a tiny blue shimmer lost in a golden sea. They will whisper gratitude to the planet that began it all. They will tell stories of oceans, of forests, of the gentle hum of bees, and perhaps they will dream, as we do now, of what lies beyond their own horizon, because the lesson never ends. To live is to continue. To survive is to journey. To love existence enough to ensure it endures. That is the true meaning of becoming multiplanetary. Not conquest, but care. Not escape, but continuation. Not arrogance, but awe. And perhaps if the earth could speak, it would not say stay, but rather something softer, wiser, infinitely tender. Go. Carry me with you. Let me live through your hands, your hearts, your futures. The stars are waiting. Go, and make sure that life never ends. The lesson of legacy. What shall we leave behind? When we look up at the stars and wonder whether those who came before us are still out there, perhaps the question that echoes back is not where did they go, but what did they leave behind? For even absence can be a form of inheritance. The first civilization, those wanderers of the deep past, did not vanish into nothing. They left the earth itself as their testament. The forests, the seas, the mountains that still breathe and move, these are their monuments. Their true legacy may not be written in metal or stone, but in the living pulse of the planet that remains. To imagine a legacy is to step beyond time. It is to accept that what we build, say, or love will outlast us in ways we may never see. If those ancient beings once lived here, then every wave that still breaks on the shore carries their echo. Every tree that grows from the soil they once walked is a continuation of their touch. And perhaps in some invisible, elegant way, their essence still travels within us, woven into the DNA that whispers through every living cell. Science tells us that inheritance is not simply a matter of memory or culture, but of biology itself. Each of us carries in our genes the accumulated history of life. The double helix, its twisting ladders of code, holds instructions written across billions of years. Inside us are traces of the earliest bacteria, the first plants, the first mammals. Within our genome are molecules forged in the hearts of ancient stars. Perhaps among those molecular stories are fragments of something more, a remnant of minds that came before ours, folded deep within the universal script of life. DNA is both the simplest and most profound legacy imaginable. It does not boast, it does not preach, it only continues. It copies itself with quiet persistence, sometimes changing, sometimes staying true. Through it, the living world keeps its promise to the future, that existence will not end with one generation. To pass life forward is to write poetry in atoms. If the first civilization left us anything beyond the earth itself, it might not be objects or technology, but principles, subtle blueprints of thought and order. Perhaps they encoded their legacy, not in machines, but in the laws of nature, in the harmony of physics and chemistry that makes consciousness possible. Maybe their greatest gift was the self-sustaining intelligence of the planet, the cycles of water and carbon, the rhythm of climate, the balance between creation and decay. Such systems are not accidental. They are art in motion, the universe teaching itself how to endure. The myths, in their way, remember this too. The ancients spoke of gifts from the gods: fire, knowledge, agriculture, music, healing, Prometheus stealing flame for humankind, Quetzalcoatl teaching the people to sow maize, Thoth giving the world language and writing. These stories may not be literal, but they hum with truth. The idea that wisdom itself is a divine inheritance, something passed from the old to the new. In those myths, legacy is not property, it is enlightenment. The gods do not give wealth, they give the tools of continuity. Perhaps those stories were born from older memories, of teachers who walked among the early humans, beings who brought understanding and then disappeared, trusting us to continue their work. If so, their legacy was not to dominate, but to empower. They did not sculpt us in their image, they helped us find our own. They left not monuments, but momentum. In that sense, legacy is not what we possess, it is what we become. Each generation inherits both the gifts and the consequences of those before it. We inherit the forests, yes, but also the scars, the oceans, but also their plastic, the beauty, but also the burden. To hold a legacy is to hold both creation and responsibility in the same trembling hands. The philosophers remind us that inheritance is not about ownership. It is about stewardship. To inherit a world is not to claim it, but to care for it. Legacy is not the wealth we accumulate, but the harmony we maintain. The earth in this view is not an artifact, but a living heirloom, passed from age to age, from civilization to civilization. We do not own it, we borrow it from the future. Perhaps that is the most profound lesson the first civilization left behind, that true legacy is not preservation of the self, but preservation of the whole. They may have understood that immortality does not mean living forever, it means ensuring that life does. To them, leaving the earth to flourish after their departure may have been the highest form of wisdom. A civilization that learns to let go gracefully is one that truly understands its place in the cosmos. The earth itself seems to echo this philosophy. It renews, it recycles, it transforms endlessly. Every mountain that crumbles feeds the valley below. Every fallen tree becomes soil. Even extinction makes room for evolution. The planet's legacy is constant rebirth. Perhaps the ancient ones saw this and modeled their own values after it. Perhaps they realized that their task was not to dominate the earth, but to make it capable of renewal, to leave it strong enough for what would come after. It is tempting to imagine they left messages for us, hidden inscriptions beneath the oceans, frequencies humming in the magnetic field, fragments of code embedded in DNA. Maybe these are not literal artifacts, but the very systems of life that keep the world in balance. Maybe their technology was the self-regulating brilliance of the biosphere itself. We often separate science and spirit, but they are two sides of the same reverence. One observes the mechanism, the other honors the meaning. The legacy of a vanished civilization might live in both. And if they did not intend to leave us anything, perhaps that too was part of the plan. Maybe they trusted that nature itself would carry forward what was needed, that the planet as a conscious organism of sorts would remember their essence, without the need for monuments or machines. To leave nothing but a thriving world may be the purest inheritance of all. Today, when we think of legacy, we often think of buildings, achievements, inventions, but the truer question is quieter. What do we leave that sustains life, that nourishes the next? To give future generations clean air, fertile soil, oceans alive with song, that is legacy in its highest form. Technology fades, ecosystems endure. The first civilization, if they indeed once walked this earth, might have understood that lesson long before we did. In the mythic imagination, legacy is also divine responsibility. The gods, when they leave, entrust their realms to mortals. They test us not with gifts, but with freedom. The Greek Athena grants wisdom to humanity, but expects it to be used justly. The Norse Odin gives knowledge of runes, but warns that understanding demands sacrifice. In every tradition, the passing of divine knowledge is also a passing of burden. Perhaps the first civilization in leaving Earth did the same. They left the stewardship of the planet to us. If that is so, then our place in this story is clear. We are the inheritors, not only of their world, but of their responsibility. To keep the balance, to protect what remains, to ensure that life continues its long dialogue with the stars. We are, in essence, the living continuation of their dream. Science, myth, and philosophy all converge here, in the same soft truth. Legacy is continuity. It is the thread that ties the past to the future, and it runs through everything, through the genes that shape our bodies, the myths that shape our minds, and the choices that shape our world. To live wisely is to weave that thread with care. Imagine for a moment the Earth as it might look from far away, a blue and white orb spinning in the dark, wrapped in thin clouds, glimmering faintly like a memory. If those ancient beings were to look upon it now, what would they see? They might see cities glowing like constellations, the pulse of communication lines circling the globe, the shimmer of satellites tracing new orbits. They might see a species struggling between creation and destruction, between greed and gratitude. They might hope that we have learned what they once learned, that power is not the same as purpose, and that legacy is not measured in monuments, but in mercy. What then shall we leave behind? Perhaps it is not enough to survive or to explore. Perhaps the truest destiny of our species is to become good ancestors, to craft a world that can sustain beauty long after we are gone, to leave the earth not poorer but richer in life and meaning. Legacy begins in the small acts, the decision to protect a forest, to teach a child wonder, to care for the invisible connections that keep our world alive. It extends into the grand ones, building knowledge, sharing it freely, shaping societies that value balance over excess. Every kindness, every curiosity, every gesture of stewardship becomes part of the inheritance we pass forward. If we listen closely, perhaps the earth itself is whispering the same plea that it once whispered to those before us. Keep me alive. Let me continue. Be the guardians of what I have given you. The soil beneath us holds not only fossils, but memories. The wind carries voices that have no words. Every sunrise is both a reminder and a request to remember that this world was a gift, and that our greatest gift in return is to preserve it. The philosophers say that immortality is not found in the body, but in influence, the ripple one life creates across the sea of time. A civilization's immortality is the same. It survives not through monuments, but through the values that shape what comes next. If the first civilization gave us anything, perhaps it was this lesson itself, that what we do with our time here will echo longer than we imagine. The myths tell us the gods left heaven open, but entrusted its gates to us. Science tells us that DNA is a language still writing itself. Philosophy tells us that legacy is the conscience of the future. Together they form a single truth. We are both inheritors and ancestors at once. What we receive is sacred. What we leave will become sacred too. So as we walk upon this earth, their earth, our earth, we should walk gently. Each step writes a word into the story of what will remain. Every choice shapes the inheritance of those yet to come. To live is to leave something, whether we mean to or not. And when our age has passed, when the monuments of our time have turned to dust and the winds have smoothed the bones of our cities, perhaps the only question that will matter is this: did we leave the world more alive than we found it? The first civilization in their wisdom or their mystery entrusted the answer to us, and the earth, still breathing beneath our feet, waits for our reply. The lesson of humility, evolution beyond memory. Perhaps in the vast unfolding of time, they have evolved so far beyond us that the very memory of Earth has faded from their minds, like a dream half remembered upon waking. Perhaps the cradle that once held them, that ancient blue sphere turning gently in the dark, has become no more than a faint vibration in the cosmic symphony, a note so distant it no longer registers. And maybe that forgetting rather than tragedy is the most natural thing in the universe. For evolution is not nostalgia. It does not look backward. It only becomes the river of life, never flows uphill. And once it passes a bend, it does not return. What was once flesh becomes energy. What was once memory becomes pattern. And what was once earth becomes myth. To evolve is to move beyond form, beyond the narrow boundaries of origin, to merge with something larger, subtler, infinitely more complex. Perhaps they have become that life so changed that no trace of what they were remains. And yet in the vast calculus of existence, they still are. Science tells us that evolution is the art of impermanence. Species emerge, adapt, transform, vanish. The trilobite, the ammonite, the saber-toothed cat, all once masters of their realms, all now silent. Even stars evolve. They swell, they burn, they collapse, they scatter. The universe itself is not fixed. It is a breathing thing, expanding, cooling, forever reimagining itself. In such a universe, remembrance is an indulgence, a temporary shimmer of awareness on an ever-moving surface. If those ancient travelers truly left Earth and continued their journey across eons, they must have changed beyond recognition. Their bodies, once bound by gravity and air, might now be composed of light, plasma, or consciousness alone. They may exist, not in 3 dimensions, but in many, moving between layers of space as we move through dreams. Their senses could stretch beyond sight or sound, perceiving the magnetic hum of galaxies, the pulse of dark energy, the birth and death of stars as easily as we perceive the flicker of fire. What need would such beings have for nostalgia? Myth in its poetic wisdom knew this long before science gave it form. Across ancient tales there are always gods who ascend, who forget the world of men, who lose themselves in the infinite. In Greek legend, when the gods took their thrones upon Olympus, they grew distant, detached from the struggles of the mortals below. In Hindu thought, the devas dwell in celestial realms, absorbed in bliss, their minds vast but detached. In Buddhism, enlightenment itself is a kind of forgetting, a release from attachment, even to the world that once nourished you. The soul evolves beyond desire, beyond memory, beyond the need to return. Perhaps the first civilization achieved that same state, not spiritually but biologically, technologically, cosmically. They transcended the limits of matter and mortality, shed their dependence on planets and suns. Their evolution would not have been simple progress. It would have been transformation in the deepest sense. Like a caterpillar becoming a butterfly, they might have become something we could not even comprehend, their previous form as alien to them as an embryo to a mind. And if so, then Earth, to them, would be like the shell of a seed, important once but no longer defining. The soil that nurtured them has done its work. They carry its atoms within them, but they no longer need to touch it. The longing for home fades not because of cruelty, but because of wholeness. When one becomes the vast, the particular desire. This is the lesson of humility that the cosmos teaches again and again. Nothing endures as it was, and nothing belongs only to itself. Even memory is a temporary arrangement of matter and light. The galaxies that form our constellations will drift apart, their familiar patterns lost to time. The sun will one day swell into a red giant, then collapse into quietness. The earth itself will be unmade, its matter scattered into new stars, new planets, new possibilities. To believe that we or anyone can remain unchanged is to misunderstand the nature of existence. Science reveals this truth with mathematical precision. Entropy increases, complexity transforms, systems evolve toward new equilibria. What was once coherent must eventually dissolve. Yet within that dissolution lies beauty. The carbon in our blood, the calcium in our bones, the iron in our hearts, all were forged in the hearts of long-dead stars. Their deaths were not endings, but gifts. The atoms that once belonged to suns now belong to us, and will someday belong to something else. We are inheritors of a universe that recycles even its gods, and so perhaps those ancient ones did not abandon Earth. They simply joined the greater flow of transformation. They became part of the universal process that unites all things. Stars, stones, life and thought. To evolve beyond memory is to participate in the universe's own forgetting, which is also its renewal. The cosmos itself is humble in this way. It creates beauty, then lets it fade. It gives form, then allows dissolution. Nothing clings. Everything continues. Myth 2 whispers of this cosmic humility. The Greek gods who forget humanity. The Sumerian Enki, returning to the heavens, leaving his creations to their own fate. The angels who fall not from pride, but from the gravity of their own transformation. Even in the East, there is the Bodhisattva's paradox, the enlightened being who can choose to stay among mortals, but knows that the truest compassion is sometimes to move beyond. Forgetting is not abandonment, it is transcendent. Perhaps then, the first civilization's distance is not coldness, but fulfillment. They have simply become what we all will become in time. They have entered a stage of existence where nostalgia no longer holds meaning, because in their state, everything is present, everything is known. Memory, as we understand it, belongs to finite minds, to beings who live across aeons, who see the whole of time at once. Memory may dissolve into pure awareness, unburdened by longing. And yet, there is a paradox here, a quiet beauty in humility itself. For as we contemplate their transcendence, we are reminded of our own smallness. We are not the first, nor will we be the last. We are not the pinnacle of creation, but one brief note in an endless composition. The universe is vast beyond comprehension, and we are but a whisper within it. To recognize this is not despair, it is liberation. To be humble before the cosmos is to belong fully to it. The stars do not mourn the clouds of dust they once were. The ocean does not grieve the raindrop. In the same way, evolution erases not with cruelty, but with grace. It is the universe's way of making room for what comes next. When we gaze into the night sky, we see billions of suns scattered across a darkness that is not empty but alive with potential. Each point of light may hold a story, a lineage, a civilization that rose, evolved and moved beyond even memory. Perhaps they too have forgotten their beginnings, yet their essence still moves through the fabric of the cosmos, influencing the unseen currents of space and time. To know this is to understand humility, that everything we are is temporary, and that transience itself is divine. Science, myth, and philosophy all converge on this same lesson. Science shows us that nothing is permanent. Myth reminds us that even gods fade. Philosophy tells us that meaning does not depend on eternity, but on participation in the whole. To exist, even briefly, is miracle enough. If those who left have evolved beyond remembrance, then they have shown us what all life must one day learn, to let go of identity, of attachment, of home itself. Their journey is not loss, but completion. They no longer look back, because they have become the very universe they once admired. They are not separate from the stars. They are the stars. They do not remember Earth because Earth has never truly left them. Its atoms, its essence, its laws are within them still. To remember is human, to become is divine. Perhaps that is the quiet invitation behind their story, not to envy their transcendence, but to accept our place within the same unfolding. We are at an earlier chapter in the same book of becoming. One day our species too will change beyond recognition. Our bodies will adapt, our minds will expand, our consciousness will blend with technologies, with energy, with the fabric of the cosmos itself. And when that happens, we too may forget the shape of our origin, but we will carry its meaning within us. To reflect on this is to stand in awe of time itself. Time humbles everything. Civilizations rise and fall. Languages bloom and fade. Even memory, the most intimate of possessions, is eventually surrendered. And yet humility gives that surrender dignity. To bow before the vastness of existence is to acknowledge that we are not its masters, but its expressions. When ancient philosophers looked to the heavens, they called it the great chain of being, a hierarchy of forms ascending toward the divine. But perhaps it is less a chain than a spiral, forever expanding, forever turning. The first civilization was a turn in that spiral. As we are now, theirs was not an end, but a transformation, as ours will be. To know this is to be humble, but also comforted. We are part of something immeasurably large, and that belonging is its own kind of eternity. If those ancient ones have forgotten us, we should not mourn it. Forgetting is not betrayal, it is peace. They have become one with the song that never ends, and in their harmony we too are contained. The universe does not remember us in words, it remembers us in motion, in the quiet persistence of being. Every atom that once formed a thought will one day light a star. Every soul that ever wondered will dissolve into the great knowing that needs no memory. So let us look at the stars not as lost homes, but as reminders of humility. Each one is a teacher, burning its life away without regret, asking nothing, offering everything. They show us how to live with grace, to shine while we can, and to surrender without fear when our time comes. The first civilization may have gone so far that even longing no longer exists for them, but perhaps, somewhere in their vast awareness, they still feel a quiet fondness for the small world that once cradled them, not nostalgia but gratitude, a wordless knowing that they began in a place of oceans and wind, of mountains and dawn, and in that gratitude, perhaps they still bless us. These newer beings still learning to bow before the immensity of it all. In the end, the lesson of humility is simple, though it takes lifetimes to understand. Nothing is owed to us, and nothing is truly lost. We are travelers on the same long road of evolution, and the further we go, the less we need to carry, even memory, even identity, even home itself. These are temporary garments we wear until we outgrow them. The earth whispers it in every breeze, every wave, every fading leaf. Change is your nature. Do not cling. Be humble, and you will endure. And if the stars could speak, they would say the same. We have forgotten what we were, but in forgetting we became everything. Perhaps that is the final blessing of the universe, to remind us that to be small is not to be insignificant, but to be part of the infinite. To be humble before the cosmos is to be one with it. And as we gaze into that boundless dark, we may finally understand they did not leave us behind. They simply became what all life is destined to become, vast, luminous, and free of the need to remember. The lesson of responsibility, to seed the universe, not destroy it. There comes a moment in every story of life when creation faces a choice, to consume or to cultivate, to destroy or to seed. Perhaps that was the final wisdom of the first civilization. The moment they understood that true power is not the ability to shape worlds, but the grace to protect them. They may have learned in the long mirror of their own rise and fall that the universe does not need conquerors, it needs gardeners. To imagine them as gardeners of the cosmos is to imagine a civilization that grew wise enough to see that life itself is a responsibility, not a right, that every spark of consciousness carries a duty to nurture, to pass forward, to extend the song of existence without silencing its harmony. They might have realized that destruction is easy, it burns fast and bright, but creation endures. To seed the universe is to participate in its continuation. Science gives us a name for this: panspermia, the idea that life spreads across the cosmos, carried by comets, asteroids, and drifting dust. In this view, Earth itself might be the child of some distant world, its oceans seeded with microbial travelers that survived the long, cold journey between stars. Life, then, would not be an isolated miracle, but a shared inheritance. The universe, through its endless collisions and dispersals, becomes a farmer of possibilities. Each world a garden, each cell a seed. If the first civilization once walked our world, perhaps they too came to understand this cosmic rhythm. Perhaps they chose to become conscious instruments of panspermia, guiding life not through accident, but through intent. They might have launched spores of DNA into the void, coded messages of vitality carried on streams of light. They could have shaped asteroids into arcs, not of passengers but of potential repositories of microbes, seeds, and the blueprints of ecosystems. A quiet, deliberate scattering of life, not to dominate, but to renew. In myth, the theme repeats across cultures: gods who plant life in the heavens, who scatter creation like a farmer sows his fields. In the stories of the Greeks, Gaia and Uranus gave birth to the living world. In Egyptian myth, a tomb spat or wept the first beings into existence. In the Rig Veda, the god Prajapati divided himself to create life. In Polynesian tradition, the Sky Father and Earth Mother gave birth to the gods through separation, making space for growth. The divine act of creation is never violent. It is an offering, a gentle dispersal. To plant is to trust the future. Perhaps the first civilization learned that same sacred trust. After all, evolution itself is a gardener's process. It prunes, selects, nourishes, and adapts. Nothing is wasted, nothing without purpose. Even decay becomes soil. The lesson of responsibility is written in every ecosystem. The predator keeps balance, the scavenger restores order, the tree exhales what others breathe. Existence itself depends on reciprocity. To give back is to survive. Maybe that is why they left, not in fire, but in silence. Not as destroyers, but as sowers. They may have scattered the seeds of life across distant systems, ensuring that even if their homeworld fell, the essence of their being would endure. Perhaps we are one such seed, an echo of their stewardship, grown wild in the fertile soil of a new world. If so, our own task becomes clear: to continue what they began, to keep sowing, to transform the universe gently into a living continuum. Science, too, urges us toward this responsibility. We now know that extinction is not an abstract fear. It is a cycle that visits all worlds bound by entropy and time. The asteroid that ended the age of dinosaurs, the volcanic winters that once shadowed the sky, the silent extinctions caused by our own hand, all remind us that life must act to protect itself, not through domination but through diversity. A species that learns to live beyond one world ensures the continuation of life, not merely its own survival, but more than that, it accepts the duty to protect, to share, to seed the cosmos with care. The philosopher might say that this is the highest form of empathy, to love existence enough to want it to continue, even without us, to see beyond the self, beyond the species, beyond the planet, and to act in service of life itself. Responsibility then becomes the moral expression of evolution, the moment consciousness recognizes that its greatest strength is not control, but compassion. Imagine, if you will, those ancient beings standing upon the edge of their departing world, the atmosphere shimmering beneath their feet. They gaze not with regret, but with calm determination. Around them float vessels not of conquest, but of promise, ships carrying seeds, spores, genetic archives, the potential of forests and oceans, yet unborn, each one a whisper into eternity. And when the winds of the cosmos catch these vessels, scattering them across light years, the beings turn away, not to forget, but to trust. Their task is complete. They have not left a void, but a beginning. That image of life being carried forward is both scientific and sacred. Comets have long been seen as messengers, their glowing trails symbols of change, harbingers of renewal. In myth, they were signs of divine passage. In science, they are icy archives of the early solar system, capable of bearing the ingredients of life. Between myth and fact, a bridge forms. Creation is movement. To carry life outward is both a divine act and a natural one. In the quiet language of biology, responsibility is encoded in the very act of reproduction. To reproduce is to give a part of oneself to the unknown, to invest in futures unseen. Every seed, every egg, every birth is a gesture of faith that life, in all its fragility, deserves to continue. Civilization, then, can be seen as life's next mode of reproduction. When we send probes into space, when we dream of other worlds, we are not escaping, we are sowing, we are participating in the same cosmic impulse that began when the first cell divided. Yet, responsibility demands restraint, as much as expansion. To seed the cosmos is not to impose our will upon it, but to listen, to collaborate with its existing rhythms. The universe is already fertile in its own way. Our role is not to terraform recklessly, but to harmonize, to find the balance between influence and humility. The first civilization may have understood this balance perfectly. They might have sown life in a way that preserved the integrity of each world, allowing it to evolve according to its own nature. True gardeners do not force the seed, they give it space to find its own form. Myth remembers this too. In the stories of the Norse, Yggdrasil, the great world tree connects all realms, but does not dominate them. It nourishes quietly unseen roots binding heaven, earth, and underworld. In the stories of the Maya, the maize god plants himself in the earth, sacrificing his body so that others may live. In every sacred narrative, the greatest creators are those who give without demand. To plant, to tend, to release. These are the divine verbs of responsibility. Our own age stands at the edge of the same understanding. We have the power to destroy, and yet within that power lies the opportunity to protect. Technology can strip forests, but it can also restore them. It can poison oceans, or cleanse them. The tools of creation and destruction are one and the same. It is intent that transforms them. To choose creation is to remember our origin, not as consumers, but as caretakers of a living universe. Perhaps that is why, deep within our myths and dreams, we keep returning to the image of the seed. The seed is the purest metaphor of hope, responsibility, and continuity. It carries the entire potential of a forest within something that can fit on a fingertip. The act of planting is both humble and infinite. It begins something that may outlast its planter. When the first civilizations scattered their seeds among the stars, they were not acting out of vanity, but out of faith. Faith that life, given time and space, will always find a way to grow. Science supports this faith in ways the ancients could never have imagined. We now know that life can survive in the vacuum of space, clinging to the surfaces of asteroids, shielded by rock from radiation. Microbes can hibernate for millions of years, waiting for the right warmth, the right moisture, the right chance. The universe, far from sterile, may be a vast field of dormant life, waiting for gardeners to awaken it. In that sense, responsibility becomes cosmic collaboration. We are not alone in creating life, we are its conscious continuation. To seed the universe, then, is not only a task for the powerful, it is a moral calling for all sentient beings. To live responsibly is to act as if the future depends on you, even if you will not see it. It means treating every ecosystem, every species, every fragile spark as sacred, because perhaps they are not just parts of Earth, they are potential seeds for worlds we will never know. If the first civilization's final lesson was one of responsibility, it was likely this: do not mistake strength for ownership. To create is to care. They may have learned that the universe's greatest law is balance, the delicate dance between chaos and order, destruction and renewal. Their legacy would not have been technology alone, but wisdom, that to wield creation without compassion is to undo it. Philosophy reminds us that responsibility is the bridge between knowledge and wisdom. Knowledge sees what can be done, wisdom asks what should be done. The first civilization might have reached the height of knowledge, but only by embracing responsibility could they have transcended destruction. And so, in choosing to seed rather than to consume, they became co-creators with the universe itself. That, perhaps, is the direction evolution points us toward: not dominance, but harmony. Not control, but care. To be conscious is to be accountable. Every civilization faces its reckoning. Will it devour its home or cultivate new ones? Will it burn its inheritance or plant it anew? We too now stand at that threshold. Our choices, how we treat the earth, how we reach for the stars, will determine whether we continue the ancient pattern or break it. To act responsibly is not to fear the future, but to nurture it. To plant where others have burned, to build where others have fallen, to give where others have taken. Perhaps, somewhere out there, those ancient beings still wander among the galaxies, watching the seeds they planted long ago bloom in colors unknown, and perhaps they wait to see if we will do the same, if we will learn the same sacred responsibility they once embraced, to turn away from destruction and toward renewal, to see ourselves not as owners of the universe, but as its steward. The earth, our oldest teacher, still whispers that lesson to us in every sunrise, every storm, every sprouting leaf. Grow carefully, give back, be kind to what gives you life, and maybe when we finally carry her essence into the stars, not to conquer, but to plant, we will have fulfilled that lesson. Responsibility is the quiet art of continuation. To seed the universe is to love it deeply enough to want it to live beyond you. That is how creation endures, not through power, but through care. And perhaps, if the stars could speak, they would say to us what the first civilization once knew. Do not burn your garden, plant it everywhere. The comfort of mystery, wonder as the reward. There is a kind of peace that comes from not knowing. It settles softly in the mind, like twilight on water, quiet, gentle, luminous without clarity. Perhaps the greatest gift the universe has given us is not certainty, but mystery. The vast, unanswerable questions that stretch across the night sky do not exist to torment us. They exist to comfort us, to remind us that we are part of something so much larger, so much older, that it humbles our need for answers and awakens our capacity for awe. When we look up at the stars, we encounter not data points, but possibilities. The distances between those lights are beyond comprehension, yet each one calls to us as though inviting us into conversation. And in that moment of wonder, before science speaks, before reason measures, something ancient stirs in us, a sense of belonging, a recognition that the unknown is not our enemy, but our oldest companion. The universe has always spoken to humanity in this language of wonder. From the first time a human looked at the Milky Way and imagined a river of souls flowing through the heavens, to the moment an astronomer peered through a telescope and saw galaxies spiraling like divine fingerprints, each act of looking has been both question and reverence. The mystery itself is the bridge between imagination and truth. Science, for all its precision, has never extinguished this wonder. It has deepened it. The more we learn, the more vast the unknown becomes. For every answer, 100 new questions unfold. We know that stars are born in nebulae, yet the forces that decide their number and rhythm remain elusive. We can measure the age of the universe, yet we cannot touch the moment before its beginning. We can map galaxies, yet we do not know why existence chose to exist at all. The silence of the cosmos, what we call the Fermi paradox, echoes louder the more we listen. If the universe is filled with worlds, where is everyone? Why does the great expanse remain so quiet? This is the heart of the paradox. Some say it is proof that we are alone, that life is rare, fragile, a flicker of consciousness in an indifferent sea. But others hear a different message in that silence, a kind of sacred stillness, as if the cosmos itself were holding its breath, waiting for us to listen deeper. Perhaps the silence is not absence, but mystery made audible. There is comfort in that silence, because within it imagination has room to breathe. If the stars are empty, then they are open. They become canvases for our myths, our hopes, our questions. Ancient peoples once filled the heavens with gods and heroes, their stories woven into constellations: Orion the hunter, Cassiopeia the queen, Anansi the spider, Quetzalcoatl the feathered serpent. The sky was never just an expanse of physics, it was a gallery of meaning. Through those stories, humanity touched the infinite and made it personal. Even now, when we gaze through telescopes instead of naked eyes, we are doing the same thing. The stories have changed: dark matter, wormholes, quantum entanglement, but the longing remains the same. We seek not only to understand the universe, but to feel it, to be part of its mystery. Science and myth, far from enemies, are partners in this journey. One maps the mechanics of wonder, the other preserves its poetry. Perhaps that is the real reward of mystery. It keeps imagination alive. Without it, our minds would shrink into certainty. Uncertainty is a small cage. Mystery gives us freedom. It lets us dream of civilizations among the stars, of ancient travelers and unseen watchers, of futures where we too become part of the cosmic dance. Whether or not those dreams are true matters less than the fact that they make us more alive. Philosophy has always whispered that mystery is not a flaw in knowledge. It is its foundation. Socrates said wisdom begins in wonder, The mystics said that the divine hides itself not to punish us, but to draw us close. Even modern physics, with all its equations, admits the humbling truth that the more deeply we probe reality, the less solid it becomes. Matter dissolves into probability. Time folds upon itself. The observer and the observed become one. The universe at its core is not a machine but a question, one that answers us with more questions still. To live well, perhaps, is to make peace with that question, to sit beneath the stars and let their silence wash over you without demanding a reply. There is a deep serenity in accepting that not everything can be known. The mind, released from its constant grasping, begins to rest. Curiosity does not die. It softens, becoming wonder instead of hunger. Imagine for a moment that you are lying beneath a night sky untouched by city lights. The air is cool, the earth solid beneath your back. Above, the stars shimmer like ancient fires. You do not know who or what lit them, nor if anyone watches from among them. You only feel their presence, the quiet assurance that they have been burning long before you were born, and will continue long after you are gone. In that awareness, there is both smallness and solace. You are not the center of the story, but you are part of it. That is enough. In mythology, the heavens have always been mirrors of mystery. The Greeks placed their gods there. The Chinese saw the celestial bureaucracy, reflections of their earthly order. The Egyptians traced the soul's passage among the stars. The Maori told of the great fish drawn from the ocean to create land. The sky was the realm of divine possibility. To look upward was to remember that existence is larger than comprehension. Even now, in our scientific age, the instinct remains. We gaze at the same sky with satellites and sensors, but beneath the mathematics, the yearning is unchanged. And perhaps that is the secret beauty of the Fermi paradox. It gives us room to wonder. The silence of the stars allows us to imagine anything. We can fill that quiet with stories of civilizations that have transcended matter, or of ancient beings who seeded life and moved on, or of lonely planets where life sings to itself. The mystery connects us not only to what might be out there, but to one another. Every culture, every age, has looked up and asked the same question: are we alone? And in asking it, we are not. The question itself unites us. Science, too, finds meaning in mystery. The absence of evidence does not extinguish curiosity. It fuels it. Astronomers listen to the cosmic background radiation, searching for faint signals of intelligence. Biologists study extremophiles in volcanic vents, proving that life can exist in places once thought impossible. Physicists debate whether reality is one universe or many. Each unanswered question becomes a doorway, not a dead end. Mystery, far from paralyzing us, moves us forward. Philosophically, this is the paradox of wonder. It gives joy even in uncertainty. To live with mystery is to live with openness. It is to accept that the universe is not obligated to explain itself, and that its silence is part of its beauty. We are not lesser beings for not knowing. We are made greater by the act of seeking. Perhaps that is why the ancients filled their myths with gods who hid themselves. The Norse Odin hung from the world tree for 9 nights to gain wisdom, not answers. The oracle at Delphi spoke in riddles, her truth cloaked in ambiguity. The Buddha pointed not to explanation, but to awakening. The divine, it seems, reveals itself only through mystery, because to confront the infinite directly is to lose the self, but to approach it through wonder is to grow. Even in the quiet of modern thought, this truth endures. The universe's mystery is not a problem to solve, it is an invitation to belong. Every question we ask about origins, about destiny, about life among the stars, is really a reflection of the same longing to understand our place in the great unfolding. And perhaps the universe's answer, whispered through its silence, is simply, you are part of it. That is, there is comfort in that. To know everything would be to end the story. Without mystery, there is no movement, no poetry, no becoming. The unknown keeps the cosmos alive in our hearts. It turns science into art, philosophy into love, existence into experience. The reward of mystery is not knowledge, it is wonder itself. When we gaze at the night sky, we do not need proof to feel its truth. The stars in their distance remind us that understanding is not the only form of connection. To be moved by beauty, to be filled with awe, is itself a kind of knowing. The astronomer and the poet meet in that same moment of silence, one calculating the light years, the other feeling them. Both are right, both are complete, and perhaps in some quiet way, the universe designed it so. The stars do not shout their secrets. They whisper, they invite, they allow each being, scientist, dreamer, philosopher, to find its own reflection in their light. The mystery remains, not as a barrier, but as a bridge. So let us rest in it. Let us take comfort in not having all the answers. Let us look at the stars not with frustration, but with gratitude, for their silence, for their distance, for their endless invitation to wonder. The cosmos does not owe us revelation, it offers us curiosity, and that perhaps is the most profound gift of all. For if the universe was simple, we would stop asking. If it were small, we would stop seeking. But it is neither. It is vast and veiled, and in its mystery lies our greatest freedom, the freedom to imagine, to dream, to love the unknown without needing to own it. Perhaps that is what the earth whispers each night as it turns beneath the stars. Don't be afraid of what you can't understand. The mystery itself is your home, and the stars in their quiet seem to answer, yes, wonder is the reward. So here we are, at the quiet end of our journey, where speculation becomes reflection and wonder becomes rest. We have drifted across time and thought, tracing the echo of a civilization that may have risen, dreamed, and then departed toward the stars. We have asked why they might have gone out of curiosity, survival, ambition. We have imagined their return through myth and memory, and we have listened to the lessons they might have left behind. How to endure, how to cherish, how to be humble, how to take responsibility for life itself. And perhaps in the soft glow of these questions, the truth emerges, not as an answer, but as a feeling, that we, standing here on this small blue world, are part of their story, that the inheritance they left us is not technology or monuments, but awareness itself. The urge to wonder, to explore, to protect, to dream, that is our birthright, the quiet fire in every human heart that still looks upward and whispers, what if? We are, in a sense, the continuation of their journey. The earth is our vessel now, the stars our destination. Their curiosity lives in our telescopes, their endurance hums in our DNA, their ambition glows in our rockets, their humility breathes in every philosopher's sigh, their responsibility echoes in every act of care we offer to the planet that made us. We are the inheritors of their hope, the living proof that consciousness endures, reshapes, and begins again. And maybe that is the real meaning of legacy, not to be remembered, but to be continued. The same way the dinosaurs, long vanished, left behind their feathered heirs, birds that still glide through our skies, singing the song of ancient giants in gentler tones. Their story did not end in fire, it transformed into flight. Change, after all, is not destruction, it is the poetry of existence. So when you hear the flutter of wings in the morning, or see the faint shimmer of a star at dusk, remember this: everything that was, still is, changed, translated, renewed. Life never truly ends. It evolves into new forms of wonder. The stars above you and the creatures around you are part of the same endless lineage. You too are part of it. Perhaps the first civilization never vanished at all. Perhaps they became the universe itself, the dust of their bodies reborn in comets, the light of their minds shining in suns, the spirit of their curiosity carried forward by us. And perhaps one day, when we finally step beyond our cradle and into the vast ocean of space, the stars will recognize us. They will say, "Ah, you've come home." Until then, we dream, we wonder, we inherit. So tonight, as you close your eyes, let the cosmos cradle you. Let your thoughts drift like constellations. The mystery will keep. The stars will wait. You are part of something vast, ancient and unfinished. Sleep well, traveler of the same universe. The story continues in every breath, every thought, every dream that reaches toward the light. We are and will always be the children of the stars.